So I'm speaking to Simon and Stephen from Flytrap. Could you just, congratulations on your nominations.
Thank you.
If you could just introduce yourself to the camera, let us know what your role is in the whole film, and then we can go from there. Or how you're connected to the film. Sorry.
Yes, okay. Stephen David Brookes, director, writer, editor, yada yada yada. A few other hats.
The list is endless. I did look on.
It's
on
not
it.
endless, but it's long.
Yeah, I mean, connection to the film is incredible. You're just involved in everything, aren't you?
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
My name's Simon Boswell. I'm the composer of the original music in the movie.
Okay, thank you. It's always pretty much the same question, and this is like personally, where did the idea come from? How did this originate? Because it is quite unusual, and I mentioned this.
Well, I'm quite unusual,
yeah, it's like
as you will begin to see. Yes. Well, it came from a notion, and it's in the opening voiceover. It came from this notion of paranoia, of do we really know the people in our lives, our friends, our neighbors? Do we know what they're capable of? Do we know what they're really thinking? And it comes from the idea that, are we paranoid to think that there's something off, or is there something really off with some of these people?
So you've got this idea in your head, and then I'm assuming it's germinating and it's turning into something else over a period of how long did it, from that thought to actually putting pen to paper?
Well, the original screenplay, which was actually a mega budget spec screenplay, was 15 years ago.
Oh, right.
And I put it away for a while, and then stumbled across the money in New York and did it. I mean,
I've never really got too much involved in asking filmmakers about money. It all seems a little bit personal, and but it always intrigues me because everyone has different ways of doing it. I've heard horror stories, nightmare stories, and how did that happen? How did you go about actually raising the finance? I know you said you stumbled over it, but
yes, well, I did sort of stumble over it. I one day was I concocted something I called the evil plan, which I had decided 2.5 years ago. I wasn't going to write anything I couldn't just go shoot. Because it's so difficult to get together $1, $2, $5, $10 million to make a film. I thought, I'm just going to start going low budget and just write and shoot. So I wrote a short called Binky, shot it, played festivals, won some awards, and people would ask me, what are you going to do next?
Yeah.
And I would just say, Flytrap. I don't know why I said that, but I said it. And 2 months after Binky was completed, I was in Manhattan having a drink with a lawyer friend of mine, and he said, you know, a friend and I want to invest in a film. Do you know of anything? Do you know of any films? And I said, well, actually, yes, I have this thing called Flytrap. He goes, oh, tell me about it. I told him about it, and as often it happens in life, you struggle, you bang your head against the wall, and all of a sudden the wall crumbles. He talked to his friend. Within a month, I had the LLC form. That's like the company to make the film. The money was in the bank, and we were shooting 3 months later.
And it was that quick?
It was that quick.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why I say it was one long stumble.
I've never heard of it. I mean, I've heard lots of stories, but never one like that. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, I know it. And yeah, I mean, when you're open to the possibilities of what can happen, what people can do, what the universe can give you, when you're just sort of open and willing to accept, stuff comes your way.
Yeah, that's really quite fortunate. Right place, right time.
Trust me, I feel very fortunate, yes.
And how did you bring Simon? I mean, what was your connection with Simon? Because I should say, I've obviously looked at IMDb, and both your CVs are like a mile long, and there's a lot of stuff in there that I recognise and I've seen. So how did that happen?
Well, it's actually funny, a little bit disturbing, but somewhat funny. I've pursued Simon for about 15 years. I remember seeing in the early 90s, it must have been 1990, this extraordinary film called Hardware that Richard Stanley directed. Got a theatrical release in the US. And there's this opening score that's orchestral, but there's this beautiful slide guitar melody. And I thought, wow, who did that? And then I read, oh, Simon Boswell. Well, this guy's good. Then, weirdly enough, I had a movie that I wrote called The Mangler 3 or 4 years later, and we were screening it at Disney, and Richard Stanley was in town with his cut of his next film, Dust Devil. And we screened it, and then I heard the Dust Devil score. Still, honestly, to this day, my favorite score. And I thought to myself that day must have been 93, I'm going to have Simon score a movie for me one day. It took until 2015, but, And then ultimately what happened was we connected on Facebook. He's good friends with a friend of mine, a brilliant writer-director named Paul Chart, who's from London but lives in L.A., and we connected, and one day I saw that on Facebook, Simon and I connected, and one day he said he was going to be in L.A. for a couple of days, and I met him. We hit it off, and...
We had a nice pot of tea.
Yes, we did, yes.
Yeah.
Proper English tea.
Oh,
in Los Angeles.
Schmoozing
It's always the tea. It's the tea that gets the English.
So how on earth do you envisage something that's not real? I mean, I guess you're being pitched about a film. You're trying to explain what you want to do with the film. I mean, I don't know. This is me surmising. So how on earth do you go about creating? Because there's nothing organic. There's nothing to. What I'm trying to say badly is the creation process of a score must be so hard because you're working against, I assume, a script or a pitch or visualization or storyboards. I don't know.
If you're asking how does a film score come about,
yes.
Okay. I mean, this is the same with almost all movies, which is that usually we wait until it's shot and I have something I can look at, ideally edited too, so I know exactly what happens where, and I write the music to that picture. That's the way it came about with this too. It's a normal process. I have done I thought you were maybe asking the question, how did he persuade me to do it? But
it was tea.
I operate very much on the basis that the universe sort of brings you in touch with people, and things happen for a reason. That's what I think, and it very much was like that. Meeting Stephen, he was just so enthusiastic and nice, and we had a nice cup of tea, and I thought, yes, I'll do your film. This is before he'd actually shot it. And then when he shot it, he sent it to me, and of course I could write the music to the picture.
So there's never a moment where you're composing the music even before you've seen a frame?
It does happen.
Yeah, right.
It's rare. It does happen. There's a few movies I've done that way round. But no, normally the process is, the music comes after they've actually shot the film.
So once you're seeing a rough cut or you've seen a print or whatever, then is it an immediate process? Or
for me it is. I take a lot. For me, what's really important is that something is very close to being a finished edit, because I first of all get the pace, of the music from the way it's edited. That's a very important first step for me. And then I simply react to it like the pianist at a silent movie. I watch it and I will sit on a keyboard and it just comes out through my hands. And I very often trust my first instinct with things too. Because my first instinct is the same as an audience member, and I think it's important to do that.
It's very difficult for me to relate to how you can suddenly be presented with this, but then this is what you do, of course, and this is your profession, and then suddenly the music comes to life as you're watching this moving film, and it's all flowing.
I manipulate people emotionally.
It's very difficult to understand how. That's a creative thing. Filmmaking is creative to actually imagine.
Right. Well, it's a very complicated process, actually. From my perspective, and this is what Simon is so brilliant at, is the score has to fit the film.
Yeah.
It can't overwhelm the film. It can't underwhelm. It needs to enhance the film so that you actually don't notice it. It's like great sound effects editing, great editing. You don't notice the cuts. Well, you don't notice the score, but you feel the score. And getting back to the point of whether Simon or another composer would come in, at what point they come in, it really needs to be when the picture is locked, because, especially with Simon, he always puts in these little accents, like a triangle or a bell hit or one note, and it needs to be exactly to the frame of that emotional moment in the film.
Ideally. The truth is, though, and this has come about, I've been doing this quite a long time, now everything's gotten digital. Editing is so much easier for people to do. There almost seems to be no such thing as a locked film, and we're getting quite deep into
Lock-ish
the
is the
I
term.
see, because you
process
can manipulate
because
it to the nth
people
degree.
change it all
Yeah,
the time. It used to be, when it was on analog, on magnetic tape, usually a lock meant lock because it was quite a business to kind of go and change stuff. But I think composers have to move with the times and be able to adjust what they're doing. But I don't like adjusting it because, like I said, I do trust my first response to something, and you can spend more time trying to adjust something than write it afresh, as it were. So anyway. But the simple fact is, if you're inspired by something, then for me it's not a job. It's really logical, easy thing to do. I just respond to it, and his film's really good. So that's the way it works.
Well, I was quite honest. I haven't seen it. I've only seen parts of it, and
I haven't seen all of it either. So
you're in for a treat. And was it more difficult to shoot than you thought? Was it, or in hindsight, was it?
well, that's the
could it have been
reality.
smoother, I suppose.
That applies to everything that's ever been shot. It is always more difficult than you expect.
Yeah.
It is always, and after the fact, there's always something you go, oh, why didn't I think of that? That's just the process.
Especially Apocalypse Now. There's a
That's
prime example.
yeah, as a prime example, yes.
There's actually a couple of filmmakers that I've spoken to, and I said to them, when you hear the story, I said to them, you should make a film of that film, or making the film, because often
It's actually been
struggle.
done. It's actually been done. There's actually a brilliant film called Living in Oblivion, which is about a micro-budget movie about making a micro-budget movie that's just absolutely has every single problem that ever goes wrong on every micro-budget movie is in that. It's brilliant.
And how long did it take to shoot? What was the time?
12 days.
12 days. Right, that's pretty okay.
Tell me about it. Yes.
And then post. I know, obviously, that includes the music and everything. But how long was the post?
In post for 1 year.
Oh right, okay. So that's quite. But was that a year to be expected, or was that were you breaking that up into segments because you were doing other projects, or were you?
No,
I can't imagine you working that.
It's a year because mainly most of that was the time it took me to edit, and I'm a very slow editor. I mean, technically, I don't know the keyboard shortcuts and so on. Creatively, I'm fast, but my fingers cannot keep up with my brain, so it takes me a while to get a cut done.
And quite often, in fact, pretty much every time I've spoken to filmmakers that have spun lots of plates, wore multiple hats, when I've asked them about doing the editing, they've often said that they wish they hadn't done the editing. Is that true in yours? Because it's difficult, I think, to be objective when it's your baby, because I suppose cutting it must be really painful. I guess you went for the same.
Well, actually, I'm very good at that. I mean, I'm a writer and a director who is not possessive of any particular moment. If the moment doesn't work, it's gone, or I adjust it. My only thing is, for budgetary reasons, I cut this film. I will never do that again. I'm hiring an editor. It's another creative voice. What the brilliant thing about a creative editor is someone who is not on set, didn't care how long it took you to get that shot.
Yes.
If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But also it's a fresh set of eyes that may look at a scene and say, that entrance should be in the middle of the scene, not the end of the scene. And they'll rearrange it in a way that the screenwriter-director might not conceive of. And oftentimes it works better.
And so that's it. It's definitely someone else do the editing, because I know you've got a load of films. I've looked, and there's quite a few in the pipeline. I think.
Yes, a few things in the pipeline, and I promise you they will all have editors who are not me. But they will have Simon doing the score. There, it's on tape. It's official.
And the premise is it's a science fiction film, pretty much, isn't it? And that's the premise. Is that your main theme for all your films, or is it just a one-off?
For me, the idea comes first,
Right.
and then I choose. Once the idea is fully germinated, and I have the premise line, and I know what it's about, I understand the thematic elements, then I have to think about what is the genre. The story tells me what the genre is going to be. In this case, it was obviously, you've seen some of it, obviously science fiction.
Yeah.
What I call soft science fiction, because the science fiction element is somewhat hidden until the end. But so the genre comes from the story. I've written horror, I've written fantasy, I've written somewhat twisted love stories. I mean, I've written things, and the idea tells me what to do.
And is there a genre that you haven't tried that you'd like to try? in filmmaking, obviously. You know, maybe you haven't done a rom-com. But seriously, there might be something you haven't done that you'd like to do.
Yeah, I would love to do a space epic.
Right.
I mean, I would love to do something like 2001, some sort of ambiguous, ambitious, visual feast. Psychedelic, exactly, yeah. Maybe it'll be my first VR film. No, we should talk about that. There
We
you
should
go.
talk about that.
Oh, yeah, there you
Thursday,
go, okay.
Thursday.
So you're working again on the next... Is there something...
No,
you're
well,
working on?
as of 30 seconds ago, I guess yes. No, but it's actually exciting. I'm going to a VR conference that
It's a VR
Simon
thing.
is
I've got
speaking.
involved.
Genuinely, that's
Yes,
something
yes.
I've got involved quite heavily in VR recently. In fact, made an app with. I have a band that performs sort of psychedelic versions of my film scores,
Right.
with a pretty psychedelic video backdrop. But through the various people that I met, we decided to make an app. Also based around the fact that I made a track with Timothy Leary, the 60s acid guy.
Really?
Before he died, yeah, in the 90s, yeah. It was a very strange thing where I was living in LA at the time and I met an Italian astrophysicist who had sampled sounds from deep
I want to
space.
live your life. This sounds fascinating.
Yeah, anyway, and she had sampled these sounds from deep space. And my agent put me in touch with her because he said, you know, maybe you could do something with it, make music, you know, do tracks. So I turned them into the musical things and work with her. And she said, oh, I've met this guy called Timothy Leary who's really into space and he wants to do a track with us. So we made this track together. So anyway, on the basis of that, we've done a thing with Google Cardboard. We make these things called Google Cardboard. So you put your smartphone in,
Right.
and it splits the image, so you get a 360-degree virtual surround environment.
Because we saw something today which I hadn't seen before. Apparently, it's been out a while. Where there's this guy, he's in an airplane, the camera's on him, but you can move it and look anywhere. And it's all seen up. Apparently, it's been out for a while now.
Yeah.
And you could, well, you've obviously seen. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
And the way that.
Well, it's a big hot thing.
Yeah, and I
virtual
suppose it's
realities
changing for
and-
filmmaking. That it must be.
Yeah, I'm slightly concerned about it because I actually don't think it's I don't think it's that good. I mean, I've been to lots of these VR conferences, and I find it. Apart from that, I was nearly sick a couple of times with headsets on.
Right,
Just
okay.
to think, you're just like being taken on rides and things, you know, virtually. I don't think it's very good for storytelling at all. You know, it's much more about sort of popcorn, you know, experience of it. And I think they might incorporate it, I think, into movies like Star Wars. We could benefit from moments when you were in a completely surrounded experience, but it doesn't help your storytelling at all. And I think it's a long way to go with all that.
I think what it's going to take, just like, you know, a platform needs the killer app, I think VR is going to need the killer story. I mean, I actually tried the Hack the Planet app with my. I didn't bring my Google Cardboard. I may have to get another copy for Thursday. But it's the idea of telling a story where, as opposed to the filmmaker telling you where to look, or a stage production where you decide where to look, but you're still seeing the entire stage, is the ability to go, oh, this character's interesting. Oh, what is this character over there thinking, even though they're not talking? The ability to sort of pick and choose as an audience what to look at has potential.
Yeah.
It's sort of potential, but it turns the whole the 100 years of filmmaking on its head.
Well, as
In
a
sense that
director,
it's
I hate
then-
the fact that
Exactly.
I wouldn't have control. Yes, of
Exactly.
course,
Yeah,
but
because
So it's a very random. It becomes a
Right.
sort of random, more democratized thing in a way, which I'm not sure is good when democracy comes down to people voting for X Factor and shit. In my opinion, it's not a good thing.
But don't worry, you'll be voting on the EU soon.
Well,
I suppose you get a vote even though you're outside.
well, I'm an American, and democracy is always good.
Especially when you're an independent billionaire.
With a
No
very
comment.
dodgy
Not you.
With a very dodgy wig, yeah.
No comment.
Listen, guys, thank you very much for your time.
All right,
No,
thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Perfect.
Thank
Really
you.
was.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
very much.
So begins my story. It started off easy enough. Landed at JFK and decided to drive cross-country to Los Angeles for a new teaching job in the astronomy department at UCLA. it all started to happen on an otherwise normal Friday afternoon. We're all trapped, you know. We're trapped from the moment we're conceived, trapped in our mother's womb, trapped by our parents' wishes, trapped by what we're taught in school, by what we're told to believe, trapped by fear, fear of the unknown, fear of what will be, fear of the wrath of some unknown or invisible God. Or worse yet, that nagging fear that once you're gone forever.
I've read about the goings-on in Los Angeles. What are you? Some kind of strange religious cult? Screwing night and day to precipitate the end of man?
Yes. That is what we want, the end of man.
No happy endings. Here's to pretending we're extending.
What are you going to do to me? Huh? You're going to fillet me? Enjoy me with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
If that's okay with you, I guess you